All right, folks, welcome back. And we're in our final session today to wrap up our forum. And what a pleasure it's been to be with all of you. What a pleasure it's been to have Greg be with us and the Holy Spirit here in the room with us and inside of us and all around us. So glad that you're here. Greg wants to give us a little bit insight, and then we'll move into Q&A.
Yeah, the first issue I want to address actually was a question that came up as I was conversing with someone during the break, and it has to do with apathy. I get asked this question probably more than any other individual question. What about people who just don't care? And my response is that there's not much you can do with them. Doesn't mean you can't talk to them. But if people don't care, then they're not going to pay attention to what you have to say. It doesn't matter to them. You can talk to them all day long about insulin, but if they don't have diabetes, it doesn't register. And there's a reason why, especially with young people, that we're seeing a little bit of a shift now, and we saw this shift during the Jesus movement with young people. There's a reason for that. And it's very obvious, it seems to me. Young people think they will live forever. I remember Simon and Garfunkel again. There was a song they had. I love this song. It's called Old Friends. Old Friends. It's a reflection of two old men who are old friends sitting on a park bench quietly, okay? And silently sharing the same years, silently sharing the same fear. Of course, the fear is the fear of death, and that's what it's about. And then there's a line that says, can you imagine us years from today, sharing a park bench quietly? How terribly strange to be 70. I turned 75 years ago. But when I would listen to that song, I would think, man, oh man, I can't even count that high, because I was 22 at the time. And so generally people who are not interested at one point in life, only engage when something bad happens to them. When death stares them right in the face, or they have to deal with some significant trauma. And everybody's not nodding your head because you know exactly what I'm talking about. While things are going smoothly, there's no need to change. I talked to a brother who's a YouTuber. His name is Sal. I'll get it in a minute. I get somebody else's name in my head and I can't get, and this guy I've known for years. Anyway, he said his dad is a quadriplegic, and his dad became a Christian when he broke his neck. And after he broke his neck, became a quadriplegic, everybody else in the family became Christians too. Now, this is exactly counterintuitive. The evil in the world befalling a family, of course they're going to forget about God. No, it was exactly the opposite. Okay? Nate Sala, S-A-L-A, Nate Sala. He's got his own podcast. And, we were having dinner a couple weeks ago. It was just a couple days after, the day after. No, it was the day of the assassination in Atlanta. And he told me a story. I didn't know all these details, but isn't it amazing? This is what gets people going. It's hardship and difficulty. This is what makes Christians mature. It's hardship and difficulty. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4, and people ask me, young people, like at a conference we had in Atlanta, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids said, sign my Bible. Not my Bible, but my book. I don't sign Bibles because I didn't write it. Give me a verse. And I said, I'm going to put this verse down. You go look it up. You talk to your folks about it. It won't make sense to you until about 20 years or 30 years from now, but I want you to have it. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 16 through 18. And this is the passage where Paul says, momentary light affliction. And we say, wait a minute, Paul, momentary light? Light? This is the guy a couple of chapters later says, I've been whipped 4 times, 39 lashes. I've been beaten with rods 3 times. I was shipwrecked twice. You know, Paul was left stoned and under a pile of stones in Lystra. You know, light affliction? No, he's comparing it to something. Momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. For we look not at the things that are visible, but the things that are invisible. The things that are visible are perishing, but the things that are invisible are forever, are eternal. Okay, now I just say that because there's 2 little applications of my sermonette here. And one is with regards to the non-believer. The non-believer is not going to come to Christ many times until God gets their attention. My dad was opposed. We had 5 kids in our family, 3 boys. All the kids became Christians because of the middle son, my brother Mark, and he opposed that all of his life. He was a union leader in Chicago, actually retired in Venice, Florida, across the way. And the year before he died, he became a Christian. It was the real deal because he was going into multiple bypass surgery, had been cut many times with this, really scared him. God got a hold of him. And after that, he couldn't talk about God without choking up. It's the real deal. But it was the hardship that made him face up with the realities of life, and youth are protected from that. They don't even want to hear an idea that they don't like. Let me go to this room before my snowflake melts, you know, the concept. And so that's part of the other application is for Christians. The Christian life is not easy. I said right at the beginning, in light of this assassination, that everyone in this room, you follow Jesus, you're going to pay a price for it. Some more, some less, but we will all pay a price. And those who are used more of the Lord, Charles Spurgeon has a citation that I read every single week carefully. I couldn't give it by memory, but he just makes the point that all of those who God has given spiritual responsibility, big responsibility, generally have to carry a secret cross that you don't know anything about to keep them from exalting themselves and falling into the snare of the devil. I get choked up when I think about that because I know so many people that many of you will look up to and admire, and you ought to admire them, but I know the pain and hardship and difficulty, the crosses they carry in their personal life. It's okay. Momentary light affliction is producing, notice the verb, is producing an eternal weight of glory. There you go.
Mic drop.
Sorry.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
We'd like to be first here.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. So Trevor's going to come right over with me.
All right.
Of course, it's always dangerous to hand the mic over to some people. I'm just saying, okay.
Hey, I'm one of them. I am one of them. So with regard to pregnancy, initially the DNA being there, a human being there at the point of conception. I'm all about that, and that's scientific. But spiritually, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on a soul?
Right.
Does that happen right then and there too, from a biblical point of view,
right?
Christian point of view?
The Bible is not clear on this. There are basically 2 views. All right, and I hold a particular one, but I'll tell you why. One view is that it's called a creationist view, and this is a word specifically applying to the question of the soul. Some of these words are used in different ways and different things. But the creationist view of the soul holds that the soul is created, each individual soul is created ex nihilo. That means out of nothing by God himself and somehow joined with the body. And the question of when that is up for grabs, so to speak. Some will say, well, then it's only when there's the quickening. Okay, when the baby starts to move, then the soul is in there. That sounds completely arbitrary to me. But in any event, that's one view. That's the Roman Catholic view, for example. And that's the creationist view of the soul. Now, the difficulty theologically with that view is we have a whole human being, body and soul, that are fallen. Okay? The result of the fall is that all of us are fallen. Our minds are fallen, our will is fallen, all our soulish elements are fallen, and our body decays and dies eventually, okay? So the question is, if God is creating the soul and the body is fallen, then how is it that the soul that God creates gets fallen? If he creates a fallen soul, then he's responsible for the fallenness of that soul. If he doesn't create a fallen soul, but places a soul into the fallen body, and then the fallen body now causes the soul to be corrupted. Okay, are you with me so far? Okay, and it's a little bit creepy sounding, but if it does that, well, this is very similar to an ancient heresy called Gnosticism, which says that material things are evil and spiritual things are good. And this is why they held that Jesus, the Gnostic heresy, which is a kind of Christian heresy in the 2nd century, that Jesus didn't actually take on a true human body. Because if he took on a human body, then his good spirit would be corrupted, okay? And so he just appeared to have a body. He didn't have a real body, okay? That's called docetism because docere means to appear. Now, when Paul says, when John writes in 1 John, anybody who confesses that Jesus, the Messiah, has come in the flesh, remember that line out of 1 John? That's what he's talking about. He's talking about Jesus took on a real human body, and he's still pure. So that was against the Gnostic tendencies of the late 1st century, okay? Now, if creationism, that view of the soul is correct, then you've got something like this evil material stuff that is corrupting the spiritual self, and that just doesn't sit well with me. It sounds more like Gnosticism, which is a heretical view. The alternate view, and by the way, there are good Christians that hold that view. I'm not faulting them, but that's the problem I have with that. The alternate view is that human beings reproduce after their own kind, all right? What is a human being? The nature of being human is to be two parts, if you will, a body and a soul, a material and an immaterial self, okay? To be fully human, you have body and soul. So when Adam and Eve recreate or reproduce after their own kind, they reproduce a whole human. And that means from the beginning, when they reproduce a unique human body, a unique soul unified with that body comes into existence at the same moment. That means the individual's in soul the whole time. And if they reproduce fallen human beings, because they're fallen, reproducing at their own kind, then the whole human they reproduce would be fallen as well, body and soul. Now, that has a theological name. It's called traducianism, Traducianism, traducian. You have to remember the name. But that makes most sense to me, okay? That's what makes most sense to me. And what's curious about most people who are pro-abortion aren't thinking about the soul at all. You know, they're not getting into these theological debates. Just regarding this issue, let's just say it's an open question. Let's just say if there is a soul, then it is a whole human being, and then then the image of God is in the soul, not in the body. Then when you destroy a preborn human being, and the soul is already there, then you're destroying an image bearer, okay? That would be wrong. Genesis 9:6, if you shed man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, because in the image of God, God created man. So you have capital punishment based on the image-bearing nature of a human being, but that's in our souls. So if there's no soul there, then I can see somebody, well, maybe the soul comes in at the 6th month, and then you can kill the child or the body before the 6th month. Well, theoretically, they have a point. But do they know when the soul is there? They don't. It's all conjecture. It's just conjecture. So if you're going to, what was the name of that? The Sands Hotel, famous hotel in Las Vegas for many, many years. Then it was outdated and they blew it up. They just put dynamite all around the bases. It was really magnificent. You can watch probably it on YouTube. Boom, the whole thing comes down. What do they have to do before they push the plunger to blow the whole building up? Clear the building. Is anybody in there? Now, what if they said, we don't know? What are you going to do? You don't push the plunger. If you don't know, you don't blow up the building. Same principle applies here. If we don't know when the soul is in the body, it could be anywhere, then we don't kill the individual who may have that soul. That's how that applies. Okay?
Okay. We're over here first, and then here. Yep.
So regarding cults, specifically like LDS, Jehovah's Witness, I know you can put a stone in the shoe, say with LDS regarding Deuteronomy 18, or Jehovah's Witness with John 1:1, because their Bible makes them polytheistic in that part. But is there a different approach, or does the tactic still work? Because even though I've talked with them many times, it's just so enrooted in them, especially if they've been raised up in that way. Do you just continue with the tactics and keep approaching it the same way you've taught us today and that you went on in Street Smarts?
Okay, there's a little bit of echoey from my ears, and I'm a little hard of hearing.
Oh, sorry.
And I know my ears are sticking way out right here, but that's not because I'm an elf. It's because I have all this hardware behind here. But I think you were saying that, or half elf, I guess. I think you were saying that you're sharing somebody even tactically and everything, but so far it's not been effective. And how long do you continue on? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, specifically though, most with like people that have a cult background or in a cult, like Jehovah's Witness, LDS, that type thing.
What kind of background? LDS. Oh, LDS. Oh, okay.
Because Jehovah's Witness,
okay.
I've had many conversations.
Thank you.
This is not.
That's right. I got my helper here. Okay. My sister-in-law is LDS. She had been raised with my wife in a Christian family, but became LDS and had 9 boys, and they're all of them went on the mission field, And I've talked with her a number of times, but she didn't want to hear anything more from me. It's really obvious. Now, if she were to bring it up, I would be willing to engage with her, but I think, to be honest, some of the times I wasn't as sensitive as I could have been, And I followed some rabbit trails about baptism for the dead that I shouldn't have followed. It's not relevant. The most important, and we talked about this a little earlier, I think, the most important things if you're talking with somebody in an aberrant Christian group. In other words, it's not Christian, but a lot of people think it is. Jehovah's Witnesses, LDS, Christian Science, which is neither Christian nor science, but nevertheless. And a lot of groups like that. There are 3 issues that you have to address. Just limit your question, your conversation, only 3 issues. Who is Jesus? What must I do to be saved? And who says that is what's your authority? Who is Jesus? What must I do to be saved? Says who? What's your authority? Because these first 2 questions are going to be answered by the 3rd question. If it's the Mormon Church or Joseph Smith or Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower, Society, or whatever, Mary Baker Eddy, or whoever, you're going to come up with the wrong answer to the first 2 questions. And that's where you should spend your time. Now, if you are spending your time there and doing the best you can, and a person is willing to continue to engage in conversation, stay with it. If they are not, then, move on until they are. Now, we have a staffer who lives in Utah, north of Salt Lake City. I'm trying to think of the little town she's in. She works for us. She prayed that God would bring people to her door. Did you do the same thing?
Yes, and they carry.
Don't ever pray that way, man. Honest to goodness. Now, she's Stand to Reason staff. She's very accomplished as a Bible teacher. She's a little bitty thing. I tell her, come on, Rebecca, stand up. She said, I am standing, that kind of thing. And so she's a little bitty thing, and she prayed, God, bring people. I don't know why you got me here in this little bitty town, but it's all Mormon. Bring people to me. Bring people to my door. Hi, we're with the LDS Church. We're a couple women down the street, and we understand you know a few things about apologetics. Will you teach us apologetics? I'm not joking. Now, she's got, 2 or 3 groups of women she's working with. Some of them are Christian that are trying to survive in this environment, and some of them are former Mormons, and some of them are tire kickers, and some of them are Mormons. And she's got to speak at some of their things. It's amazing, but she doesn't. She says to her Mormon missionary friends, they come over and she said, okay, now you tell me what do I need to do to be saved? And so they make this whole list of things, LDS. They said, okay, what do you say? She said one thing. She took a piece of paper out, J-E-S-U-S, and spun it around and stuck it for him. My little bitty Rebecca, God bless her heart. There it is. One thing, Jesus. Jesus saves. So, you never know. And she's had people come around. God answers your prayer, then do what you can. It's all in his hands ultimately, though. Yeah.
And John had a question right here.
So my question is a little add-on kind of question. A lot of the examples that you gave this morning or in the book are kind of one-time moments on the plane or at whatever the film store.
Right,
That's what you do there? Yeah.
Ships passing in the night kind of thing.
Correct. How would you add to the game plan, alter the game plan when you're dealing with someone you live with, that you see every day, that you've asked these questions to?
Sure. Good question. And I would not alter my game plan at all. I would just, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. I would be alert for any opportunity that I had to ask an appropriate question for the circumstances that might bring up spiritual matters, if the person's interested. All right? I'd be looking for those opportunities. And by the way, here's something that you guys can do that I know some of you do. I don't have a lot of non-Christian friends. I have almost none. Not anymore, because of what I do. I'm just the way it is. Most of you are out in the world, you have jobs or whatever, okay? Be available when one of your friends is going through a hardship to ask them, how can I pray for you? How can I pray for you? This little question has like sledgehammer impact on some people. They can't imagine that someone would take the time to pray for them and then pray for them. You can pray then if you want. Maybe it's not convenient. It might be embarrassing and say, I'm going to be praying for you and I'll check in with you in a couple of weeks and we'll see how it is, then check in. This is the existential thing. This is the heart thing. It's not apologetics. I think one of the most effective talks I ever gave, or it was a moment in a talk, I was speaking at University of California, Cal. You know where Cal's located? Berkeley, also known as Berkeley. It was an absolutely full auditorium. It was about this size, maybe a little bigger, and there were overflow rooms. Okay, this was maybe now 15 years ago. But at the end, I was talking about, because I talked about moral relativism, and it was more of like a philosophy lecture. And then when I got to the end, I said, the failure of moral relativism demonstrates that moral objectivism is true, blah, blah, blah. In other words, they're real morals. And guess what? We don't keep them. This was kind of my application phase. And I said, we look down inside of ourselves, we realize that there's something that we see down there that we don't like. And that thing is moral. And it's dark. And we don't want other people to know about it, but we know about it. And we have a feeling about that awareness. And that feeling has a name in English. And I asked the audience, what is the word that we use to describe our feeling of our moral brokenness? And I just waited. And then the people said, I could just hear it. Guilt, guilt, guilt. Different people were saying it. I said, right, we feel guilty. Okay, here's my question. Why? Why do we feel guilty? Maybe we feel guilty because we are guilty. Is that in the running? And then I said this, the answer to guilt is not denial. That's relativism. The answer to guilt is forgiveness. And this, I said, is where Jesus comes in. And that was the very first time the entire night that I mentioned anything about Jesus. But what I had just been doing for the whole hour before that is gardening, to be able to make a conceptual set of circumstances where Jesus began to make sense. Objective morality, we violated it, we're guilty. Jesus, forgiveness. And then I said, and I'll tell you about that tomorrow night, because the next night, was the talk I guess I'm giving tomorrow morning about Jesus being the only way. They had to come back on Saturday night if they wanted to hear that. But the reason I mention that is because notice in that moment, I was aiming right for the heart. I was going right for the, sometimes we call it the existential element, the experience, the deep inside hunger and desire that we have for completeness, or in this case, for forgiveness. And sometimes that's where we go. Sometimes we do what we can, and then we take an end around. And when we ask people, can I pray for you? That's an end around. Well, you got to prove to me that God exists before you're going to pray for me. Nobody's going to say that. Probably. Never know nowadays anyway. But the point is that you're showing a personal interest in them, and therefore may make a difference. It may make a difference. So that sometimes, keep that in mind. Sometimes that's the thing that's going to penetrate. Be around for when the second shoe falls, right? Something goes wrong, when they hit the hard times. Can I pray for you?
Great. Thanks, John. Let's see. Connor's got a question right there.
Greg, thanks for being here. Thank you for doing this. My question to you is, in your first couple sessions, you gave us a lot of insight into how to navigate the conversation. But I guess my question to you is how to know which conversations to enter. So in your professional life, you have a lot of opportunities to do that maybe a lot of us don't have. Okay. But you gave the example of the girl with the pentagram. Do you talk to every person you see with a pentagram necklace? How do you know which conversations to engage in?
Okay.
What's the filter? What's the discernment to know this conversation is my assignment from Jesus, or I can relax and read a book on the airplane this time?
Yeah, I think I got it. How do I judge which conversations to have?
When is it?
Is it Connor? Is it? Yeah, okay. There are probably two different views on this. And one view is really spiritual, and the other view isn't. I have the non-spiritual view. The so-called spiritual view is that you try to attend really carefully to what you think maybe the Holy Spirit is saying to you. Okay, I think that's a mistake. And the reason is because God doesn't whisper. Now, this entails a whole bunch of other stuff that it probably would not be a good idea to get into. But every single time that God tried to communicate something clearly, I misspoke. Every single time God wanted to communicate to anyone in Scripture, he didn't try. He didn't whisper. He didn't hint. He didn't nudge. He just did it. Saul! Saul! I don't know, Levi, I think God's trying to speak to me. What do you think? Plus, I can't see. I'm blind. No, God speaks clearly when he wants to say something directly. Okay? I assess the circumstances, and I make an assessment of the circumstances themselves. All right? And I see if they're opening here. And I'm keeping in mind what Paul said in Colossians 4, that you conduct yourself with wisdom, making the most of the opportunity. So you try to make the most of the opportunity. I'm not as aggressive as some. Ray Comfort. Last time I saw Ray, because I've done some stuff with him over the years, he's in the LA area. His house is down from their studios, and so I was filming some stuff for them in their studios. His team called him and said, yeah, Koukl's here. He came in and he handed me a tract. If you don't know Ray Comfort, he's Mr. Tract. So he gives me a tract. It says new tract, so he gives me a tract. Ray, I'm already a Christian, that kind of thing. Different people have different styles, okay? And I think there are times when God really lays it on our heart to do something, but I don't think we at all have to think, is God laying it on my heart? Is it Nehemiah? It says that God laid it on Cyrus's heart or whatever. Is it one of those guys? Those minor, I don't remember the minor guys. They're minor. It's a bad joke. Anyway, the point is that God laid it on people's heart to do different things, okay? Nehemiah to build a wall or whatever, and Cyrus to give the permission, whatever. But it isn't like they were aware, God's telling me to do this. No, they were acknowledging ex post facto God's role in the process after the fact. It wasn't like they had to develop this ability to hear. I don't think that's biblical because God doesn't try. God doesn't try. People say God's trying to talk to you, but you're not hearing him. Then God's not talking because he doesn't try. Try implies failure. God can't fail at anything. So when it comes to these kinds of things, I make my own judgment. Now, I trust in the sovereign work of the Holy Spirit in my life that he's going to work through me in whatever I'm doing. I trust him in that, and I try to use good judgment. But the judgment is left up to me, okay, to do. And I mentioned about the gal who I didn't want to talk to because it was too early in the morning, and then it just worked out, right? You know, and God did that. It wasn't me. But I'll tell you about another thing. 5 years ago, I was in, starts with a P, Paraguay. I got the P part out. I got to download the rest. The hard drive is working slower than it used to. I'm just saying, the broadband is getting narrower, all right? I'm down in Paraguay for 10 days. I'm working like crazy in Paraguay in 3 languages because the Mennonites hired me, and they're German. I'm in Paraguay, that's Spanish, and I speak English, all right? And just enough Spanish to get myself in trouble. So I'm working. Then I got to fly back in the middle of the night, and I land in Brazil somewhere, and I'm in the airport, and there's the restaurant, and I'm hungry, and it's after midnight, but I'm afraid of the food because just 2 weeks earlier, I was in Uganda, and I got really bad sick. So the whole time I was in Paraguay, I almost ate nothing but pizza because it's well cooked, right? And seriously, I see this young man who's talking to a woman, the waitress, and he's carrying on. They speak Portuguese there, and I'm thinking, he looks American, but he looks like he knows Portuguese, so I'll ask him if it's okay to eat. And so I go up to him and I said, sure. I asked him, what's the deal here? Oh, yeah, this food's fine. I'm going to get some myself. I said, oh, great. And I said, why don't you sit down with me? You know, we'll chat. Now, I found out why this young man could speak Portuguese so well. He was a Mormon missionary. Now, remember, I just spent 10 days working my butt off, and I'm tired in the middle of the night, halfway home. I'm not quite halfway home. It's still South America. Do I want to talk about God? No. Do I want to fight with a missionary that's Mormon? No. But then I thought of my tactical game plan. This is something I didn't have time to share with you. What I thought of is, I got a game plan that allows me to get involved by asking questions, and if I get tired of talking for whatever reason, all I have to do is stop asking questions, and I'm done. You see what I'm talking about? So I thought to myself, and here's my principle. It's in this conversation is in the Street Smarts book. Easy out, easy in. Easy out. Is it going to be easy for me to get out? No reason why I can't just ask him some questions about Mormonism. Now, it wasn't a very long conversation because he had to catch a flight to Argentina or someplace, but the principle is still in place there, you know. And so there are times I'm just not into it. I want to sleep. I want to read. I want to watch a movie, whatever. I don't feel like I have to bother. Hey, what's your name? Are you a Christian? Washed in the blood? Jesus is coming, you know, any moment. Right now. Anyway, it's just not my style, and I look for an opening. In the book I say I'm looking for the person who's looking for me, all right? And I had my discipler first on, his wife Kathy, and this is in the 2nd chapter of Tactics. His wife Kathy had mentioned something about sharing her faith, and she said, Jesus said in John 10, my sheep hear my voice. Okay, now, just for clarification, she was using the verse accurately because that is the verse that Jesus is speaking of in the context of evangelism. He is not talking about Christians hearing Jesus. It's totally different. Nevertheless, the point she was making was, when I talk to people, I watch to see if the sheep lifts his head. If you're having a conversation with somebody and sometimes they're just bored or they just go on or they don't want to hear it, then she said, I just let them keep eating grass. But if you talk to sometimes there's this little spark, and it's like in the metaphoric sense, the sheep lifts his head. Here's the voice. Here's the voice of the shepherd. And that's the whole section is about that. It's about evangelism, essentially, and why the Jews didn't become Christian, because they don't hear his voice because they're not his. That's Jesus' argument there. In any event, the Jewish leaders. So I'm just looking for the person who's looking for me. And if I get involved in a little discussion with somebody and it goes nowhere, I let it die a natural death. It's fine. If I run out of time, like with the witch in Wisconsin, So I have a very relaxed approach to that. Some people are more aggressive, that's fine too.
Let's see. Right back here, Trevor. She's had her hand up for a little while.
Thank you so much. In this day and age and around people my age and younger, I feel like logic and reason as a basis of just engaging with one another is replaced by a lived experience and identity. And so it's very hard to relate with facts with people who take or ground themselves on the authority of their lived identity as grounds to argue anything. My question is, do we try to dismantle that line of thinking to bring them up to logic, or do we try to, in their flawed reasoning, try to find some spark of logic and reasoning that they have broken, that's inconsistent, so that they leave it? Or do we try to appeal to logic and reason? Does that make sense?
There's a little echo. I only got parts of this. I heard about, do we try to dismantle or lift up? What's the circle?
So friends who kind of view life more from their lived experience is what's important, or their identity is what's important, not so much logic and reason, particularly relative to belief and theological. Right. So how do we wrestle with someone who's fully into their lived experience, identity, and yet we want to also bring them along with some logic?
Sure. It's curious, by the way, that your terms lived experience and talking about identity, like these are terms that come out of critical theory.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So like critical race theory, CRT, that got morphed into DEI. Okay. So there's a whole history here that people have absorbed. Some have been taught, and some of them just absorbed it. Okay, I'm into my thing. Okay, you do you, kind of thing. And this falls a little bit in the category of apathy, where people, they don't really care because everything's going fine with them. Okay, until things don't go fine, and it might be years before it doesn't go fine. And me, it was a broken relationship after years of a relationship that kind of got my attention. It didn't bring me to Christ, but it made me face my worldview, which I call it cosmic alienation, is the way I described it back then, because I was all alone in the universe, okay, on the way I viewed everything, all right? So sometimes it takes that kind of thing. If a person is willing to engage, and talk about some of these things, you mentioned facts, etc., everybody is interested in reason. Everybody is. And the reason is because they're made in the image of God. Now, it doesn't mean they always respond to reason. But if you talk to these people who say, we don't care about reason, then ask them why. And they're going to give you their reasons. I mean, you can't escape that. That's the way everybody responds. Who's to say, people will say. I said, the person with the best reason gets to say. That's the way it always has been, kind of thing. But I understand the blockage you're facing, though. And it's not that people aren't willing to engage that. If they tell you, that they're not believers, and then why not? Well, they'll give you all the reasons why Christianity is wrong or false or whatever. So it isn't like they've not engaged in reason. What they're doing is they're rationalizing to themselves. It's kind of like an echo chamber. They call it, I'll think of this word probably at 2 a.m, but they're confirmational bias. That's the word I'm looking for, confirmational bias. They're looking for a confirmation of their own biases. They don't want to hear what you have to say because they're comfortable in the world that they're in. And so you have a choice at this point. If these are people that are in your life on an ongoing basis, you just keep your eyes open for opportunities to, with questions, begin to gently challenge their view. If they say, well, I don't like how these Christians are filled with hate. What do you mean filled with hate? Question, right? What's hate? Well, hate is kind of a visceral hostility towards somebody. Okay, where is the Christian hostility towards people? Most Christians don't express that hate. The word hate is taken on a new definition. Hate is the word that you can use to describe anybody who disagrees with you. And by the way, this goes back to critical theory too. It's called the oppression by ideology, and the idea that ideas are themselves oppressive. It used to be oppression was when you don't let blacks drink at the water fountain, or they have to sit in the back of the bus, or you take somebody who's speaking against the government and you put them in prison. It wasn't just the idea. Now, according to critical theory, the idea itself is oppressive. And so when you start expressing ideas that are conventional, classical, Christian ethical views, just the expression of the idea is an act of oppression, all right? And even an act of violence. So when you speak certain words, those words are violence. I know you've heard this because you sound like you traffic in the ideas a little. That the words are violence, okay? That's why silence is violence, You're not using the words against the words that are violent and fire. And because words are violent now and ideas are acts of violence committed against people, the people can defend themselves with physical violence. This is how Antifa defends their violence. Antifa, anti-fascist, right? But they're fascistic in all of their behaviors. They don't even know what a fascist is. I'm getting off on a tangent now a little bit, but just for your information, Benito Mussolini was kind of the inventor of fascism, though it was kind of there in the past. Fascism is an extreme statism. Okay, what Mussolini said is everything in the state, nothing outside of the state, and nothing against the state. That doesn't describe any conservative of any kind in this entire country, but they're called fascists because their language goes against the grain of leftists, and so their language is active violence, and they can work violence, physical violence, against the language they view as violent. How do you deal with people like that? You love them. You do not fulfill the stereotype except for when they are stereotyping the speaking of truth in love as violence, and then you have no choice. You're not being hateful. You're not being violent. But this is how the rhetoric is all twisted. I have a suspicion there's a whole bunch of stuff that has just become clearer to you than it ever was in terms of what's going on here. It's the way the language is being used and the influence of certain philosophies on especially millennials and younger, and lived experience. So it's a basic tenet of critical theory. So what do? We do not fulfill... Let me back up and put it this way. I was going to say you don't fulfill the stereotype, but they think if the words of truth are violence, well, there's nothing you could do about that. You still got to speak the truth. Jesus did. Full of grace and truth. John chapter 1. Full of grace and truth. He didn't suspend truth to be gracious. He did both. Okay? And he got himself killed in the process, by the way. So our verse for defending the faith, 1 Peter chapter 3, says, always being ready, sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts is the way it starts. Always being ready to give an answer to make a defense. I'm supposed to know this first, Pastor. To make a defense, an apologia, an apology, if you will. Make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an answer for the hope that's within you, yet, important qualifier, with gentleness and reverence. Yet with gentleness and reverence. That's key. That's key. So we speak the truth in love, gentleness and reverence, and we let the chips fall. Everybody's not going to respond. Some people don't respond for a long time, and eventually it has an effect. I had a teacher when I was a first Christian who said, the sun melts butter and it hardens clay. It melts butter and it hardens clay. You're going to get both kinds of responses. You give the truth.
Great question, and thank you. Yes, right here. Listen, Trevor's coming. We'll take two more questions, one here and one here, okay?
Hello, and thank you. My question is, you said that you have 2 children, and one of them teenager. I'm going to have teenager very soon, in the blink of an eye. How do we raise a man with a backbone? And that a culture teaches us how to hate them, and I cannot even predict what will be in the future.
I need help in that.
Yeah.
How do
you raise a man with a backbone in the culture we live in?
Oh, man. Well,
She's looking ahead.
yeah, Ann. You tell Ann to man up. Now, I'm making a little bit of a joke, but I think there's truth in this. I have 2 daughters, okay? And one is not a Christian. The older one is not. The younger one is not a good trajectory, so you never know, okay? I have 2 suggestions about child rearing based on my own failures. First is you want to have a regular way of investing spiritual life into the lives of your children, okay? A lot of times that's like after dinner, maybe you have 15 minutes and you read through the Bible, or there's lots of different ways to do this, okay? If you're homeschoolers, you know this can be worked into your homeschooling and stuff like that, but there's got to be something regular where you're investing spiritual life into your kids, okay? And the 2 important points there has to be early. You want to start it before, let's put it this way, you want them to look back on their life and never remember a time when this wasn't part of your family. Now, going to church on Sunday, that's a regular part, that's good, but I'm thinking something a little bit more family-oriented, all right? So that's the first part of that, being early, and it be consistent. Doesn't have to be long. It might even be 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but it's got to be consistent. When your kids get older and start asking questions about the defense of the faith, I have some books I recommend, written by Natasha Crane, who's actually now on our board. She's wonderful. Natasha, C-R-A-I-N, Natasha Crane. And her first book is called Keeping Your Kids on God's Side. And she's a mom with now young teenagers. And the book is meant to give you little vignettes, little studies that you can read beforehand and then use with your kids on a regular basis about the truth of Christianity, okay? It's probably better for middle schooler style, but there's no reason you can't start earlier. Okay, I'm just saying you got to invest in that, okay? That's a really important part, all right? Now, what I say to dads is don't yell at your kids. And what I mean is don't raise your voice. You can correct them all the time. You ought to be corrected now. But don't raise your voice. It's very hard for adults, parents not to do that, because kids can really be annoying. Do I have an amen? Okay, amen to that. And but if you start raising your voice, this is counterproductive. It's counterproductive, especially for dads. Just saying. I know bad experience. Me. Actually, both sides of my life. My dad and me as a dad. Just saying. Okay. Now, that's to build a foundation. Here's a way I put this to, you use the word backbone. And the difficulty is we live in a culture that makes everything really easy on kids. And parents go out of their ways to make things easy on kids. And they think this is good parenting. It is not. There's a book that you can get written by a couple of teenagers that's titled Do Hard Things. Now, I've never read this book. And these kids, their dad has gone south. He's defected from the faith, famously, all right? Nevertheless, I think the concept is really important. You've got to force your kids to do hard things. We don't live in a frontier culture anymore. Kids don't have to do anything but press buttons. This is terrible. They can't even use a map. How many people here can use a map? I don't know. Some, yeah, and so I would go out in Wisconsin with my daughter, and I'd say, get the map out, we're going somewhere. When she was about 8 years old, said, you help me find, we're going to read the map and go. Because now we got GPS and everything like that. And so we have to engineer ways for young people to do difficult things. And that means usually taking things away from them that make it easier. And I can't give you any specific things. I think it's getting harder and harder to do this. If you live in a rural environment, much easier, okay? Harder when you live in, a city, because everything's taken care of, Moms, don't empty your washer. Have your kids empty. Have your kids load it. We had 2 dishwashers in our house when I was a kid, in the 50s and early 60s, 2 of them, me and my sister. Okay? And there are 5 kids in our family. We had different jobs, and they all rotated. My sister and I, she acted like my wife sometimes. My sister and I would rotate washing and drying dishes every night. We have 7 people in our family. And then the other 3 would rotate sweeping the floor, clearing the table, and putting away the dishes. They'd rotate. They were younger. That was their job. Well, we had jobs. We had chores. It was been really, really hard to initiate chores even in my own family now. But that's healthy. It's good. Do hard things. You said backbone. That's it. They got to be, parents, and this is especially for moms. It's not so hard for dads. Dads are going, get out there. Do it. Moms are going, ooh, protect. We need both, okay? If mom rules, the kids are going to be overprotected. If dad rules, it's going to be in an excessive way, then it's going to be too harsh. You need both. But you got to be willing to push them out and make them suffer. Be willing to let them suffer, because it's the hard things in life that teach the toughest lessons. I mean, it's ancient wisdom. Read Proverbs. It's all there, But I would say these are things that now as I look back, I would do a number of things very differently. People sometimes say, I look back at my life, I have no regrets. Man, what kind of life did you live? I got all kinds of regrets. How can somebody say that? I don't get that. In any event, so I look back and I would make things harder. I wouldn't give them money. I would make them do chores for money, and they got paid for the quality of work they did. And if they didn't work it, they didn't get the money, and they didn't get it from me either on the side. So I know one circumstance. The guy sent his boy, I was thinking of his nephew out. Okay, I want you to clean this thing here I'll give you $20. And then after he's done cleaning, he said, how good a job did you think you did? Well, I guess about 50% job. I gave it 50% effort. Good, I'm going to give you $10. You get 50% pay. Oh, that guy did 100% next time around. So the idea there is just to get them to do stuff. Get them away from the screens. I know it's almost impossible. The worst thing I ever did for my daughters, and they both got their iPhones when they got out of grade school, is to get them iPhones. But you cannot, it's like saying, no, you tell your wife, we're not going to drive, we're going to drive a horse and a carriage now. You can't live anymore in our culture, unfortunately, without some of these things. But we have to try to manage them as much as possible. Anyway, there's just a couple of thoughts from a father who has many regrets and would do things differently. Had a chance. I'm glad you're asking the question now.
Great. Okay. One more question right here, Trevor. Right here. No, the young woman right there.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today, speaking with us. My question is, how do you respond to someone who would say, okay, well, you guys can't, you Christians, you guys can't agree amongst each other. Like, you have so many different denominations, and like with the Protestants, it's like 32,000 different sub-denominations and different types of. So how do you respond to someone who says, like, who do you believe, and which denomination do you go for, and if you guys can't agree amongst each other, like, why should we even believe you?
Thank you. About denominations?
Yeah.
Yes.
Why, if you get denominations, why should I sign on?
Okay.
With any of them, if you guys can't agree.
Sure. So the way I'd want to pursue that, there's a problem with the challenge. They're making something sound unreasonable that's not unreasonable. Okay, so I'm going to try to help them to see this. Let's just say this person is an atheist. A lot of times they raise this question. And they'll sometimes say something like, well, I don't believe in religion, I believe in science. Oh, okay. Do scientists all agree? No, there's massive disagreements on everything in science. Massive disagreements. Well, then why do you believe in science if people disagree? If your own people can't agree on science, why should you believe it? Why should I believe in science? Okay, so it's a fair question to help people see that this is an unreasonable expectation to make. Okay, here's another way of approaching it. So you say in Christian denominations, why would you call them Christian? That's the question I would ask. Well, because they're all Christian. Okay, well, in other words, they all hold something in common that identifies them as the same group. Is that what you mean? Yeah. Those things that they all hold in common are the things they all agree on. Are there individual disagreements about other things? Sure. So what? All kinds of people disagree on all kinds of things. All right? I'm not asking any Christian to, I should say any non-Christian to join a particular denomination. I'm not saying my denomination is the true denomination. Okay? By the way, that's the question that Joseph Smith asked when he was praying in Palmyra in New York, and he was asking God to show him the true denomination of those that were in that city. It's the wrong question to ask, as if God's going to show by some kind of revelation. If you want to know if any particular teaching of any Christian group is sound, you got to go back to the source, and the source is Scripture, okay? But no, he didn't. He was looking for a revelation, and God allegedly told him that all of these other denominations were abominations, and he had to restore the lost gospel, which is why we have the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, okay? So to me, it's not a significant problem that people have different points of view within the larger group, okay? So if the question is, well, why should I believe? When you guys can't even agree amongst yourself, do scientists agree among themselves? No. Do atheists agree among themselves? No. Do skeptics agree among themselves? No. Now, there's something that holds them all together, larger issues. You know, atheists don't believe in God, but they have a variety of distinctions about that. Skeptics are skeptical of different things, but not all things. There's some body of belief that they all hold to, and that's what we're appealing to. What C.S. Lewis called mere Christianity, the kind of Christianity that I characterized in the story of reality. I'm not beating a drum for any denomination there. I'm trying to explain what the basic account of Christianity is coming from the story of reality that we find in Scripture. So if somebody were to press me on that issue, I would just give counterexamples. Well, wait a minute, you scientists don't all agree, skeptic, atheists, so why is that a problem? If you say Christian denomination, that means they agree on something, a core set of beliefs. That's what makes them Christian. And if they don't agree with that, they're fine not to agree with that. Start another group. Start Jehovah's Witnesses. Start the Mormon Church, or become whatever. But if you're going to be part of a group is defined by certain core beliefs, and that's what defines Christianity. Spasiba.
Okay, well, we are a little bit over time, but I think it's been wonderful to take questions and hear from you all. Greg is going to be around a little bit.
Should I say something about STR?
Yeah, and I was going to ask you if you just, how can we find you? How can we find
I mentioned Stand to Reason, the organization, the acronym STR, the website, str.org. You can download our app into your phone. You can go there and check things out. There's just so many resources there. I mentioned we have a bookstore. You can get the books, but don't tell my staff this, but you can get it faster from Amazon. You can do that right now kind of thing. Easy on the phone, tap, 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 and you got it. But I would like that this meeting not be our only encounter, so to speak. And I know there's a number of you have told me you've been hanging with Stand to Reason for a long time. You are in our community already. You're receiving the training material we send out at no charge on a regular basis, through email. And so, but the rest of you, I want you to become part of our community. I'd like to send Solid Ground out to you, which is an article I write every other month. It's about 3,500 words. It's chapter size. Virtually every one of my books originally came chapter by chapter from a Solid Ground, which you guys can get at no charge. And if we know who you are and where you live. And there's another one-page, 800-word piece that I put out on the alternate months called a mentoring letter, so we can mentor you as a team. But in order for us to do that, we got to know who you are and where you're at. And so if you go to our website, str.org, and in the upper right-hand corner, it says register. And if you don't find it there for some reason, go to the very bottom of that page, and you'll see that they're register. And you'll also find somewhere on the app where it says register, probably at the bottom of the opening page. And that's where you just tell us who you are, where you live, and what your email address is. And we will send you regular stuff, good stuff, substantive stuff that will help you walk as a more effective ambassador for Christ in our culture. So the number one thing I'd suggest is just to register. Do that, and then we're connected, okay? And if you want to listen to the podcast, we have multiple podcasts. I do 2 one-hour shows a week, and then I do 2 one-half-hour shows with Amy Hall. And Amy's magnificent. I talked to somebody here who's really a big fan of Amy's. She outshines me. Like, she's so amazing. But we answer questions. Almost in both podcasts, we answer questions. So I just wanted to alert you to that if you want to get kind of a regular dose of things. And when challengers call in, you'll probably, if you're familiar with the tactical approach, you'll see how I'm employing that approach with challengers that will call in, okay? So those are the things I think that will help you most, and I hope you become part of our community at STR. Yes?
Is the podcast on Rumble?
Is it on what?
How do you get...
Well, it's, I don't know where, where all good podcasts are sold, kind of thing. Well, I don't know where, like, is it...
You're on Apple.
Oh, on Apple. Is that what you said, Apple? Yes, by Apple Podcasts, you get it there. Correct. And you should be able, even on our website, to be able to subscribe for the podcast. There's little icons for that. And don't ask me about a lot of digital stuff, because I'm not too clever in that. But I know it's available, certainly on Apple and other places that provide podcasts. You can look up Stand to Reason on Apple, and that's probably where you get it, right? Yeah.
And I think virtually everything that Stand to Reason has produced, at least in the modern era, maybe the last 15 or 20 years, is available on the website.
The archives of all the shows, and we just got a lot. We had a great website, and it's very easy to use. There's lots of stuff there.
And it's very searchable. You can find topics, you can find dates, whatever, however you would access that. I'll just mention 2 other parts of the ministry briefly. One is that maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, you initiated STRU.
That's right. And
this is a collection of training that Greg and his staff have produced in episodic versions, meaning 3, 4, 5 episodes in the training, and it's video based. It's got questions, it's got resources along with it, and you must be up to maybe 30 topics or 40
like
topics
right,
at this point.
Exactly.
And it's awesome. It's a wonderful resource, STRU. It's free, and you just sign up specifically in it. And it allows you to have, this is a great resource for small groups, home groups, small classes at church. And so it's just a great place to go to get some really solid resources in a very, very easy way.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important, really important kind of new feature, relatively new, to your ministry. The other one that comes to mind is that you're currently doing 6 conferences a year, primarily, as you said this morning, for middle school, high school. But as I've heard you said, you're not checking IDs.
We'll let you in.
Yeah,
Clark.
so I'll put on a baseball cap.
And those are called reality reality apologetics conferences. They're student conferences, but we get a range of ages, but we're really shooting to pass the baton to the next generation, because the most important generation is always the next generation. And so that's what you're talking about here, and that's what we're doing. We're not a youth enterprise, but we've been so successful with these events that our very first event in Atlanta was 1,100 to 1,200 students and people in general, but it was we just filled the place, and it was wonderful. And in 2 months, in 3 weeks, we've got Seattle, and 2 weeks ago, every single seat for the Seattle event was sold out. So 5 weeks ahead, even the overflow rooms completely sold out. And then 3 weeks later, we're going to be in Minneapolis, which is still a pretty long drive for you here. But usually we push very close to 4,000 the last 5 years there, because it's the biggest church in the state. But this just shows that the young people care about this stuff. And characteristically, the churches are not feeding them in this way. And that's why they're coming to us. They ought to be fed. They have to have their questions answered. But I understand local church work is hard. Pastors have got their hands full. But anyway, next year in the fall, the month of September, we'll be in Atlanta again, and that is kind of within striking distance for you guys.
Sure.
We have 15, in Atlanta we had 15 states represented, 15, which is characteristic wherever we are in the country. We'll be in Dallas, we'll be in Philly, we'll be in Southern California, and Seattle, and Minneapolis, so that rounds out the 6.
And now one of those, I think it's Dallas, is live streamed.
Live streamed, yeah. So if you go to realityapologetics.com, realityapologetics.com, all the information's there, and the information for live streaming the Dallas event is on there too.
So if you actually can't be there in person, you can live stream and benefit.
That's right, exactly. I'm just saying, these things are loads of fun. The kids just love them. And by the way, I'm not in charge of the fun, because I'm not fun. My daughters will tell you I'm not fun, but we have people who are fun that are in charge of the fun, and it's just all mixed in. It's all substantive. We do not dumb down anything. The kind of talks that I give you here, this is what we do there. We just throw the ball so people can catch it. That's the characteristics of our team, okay? We're good communicators. So anyway.
Great, perfect. Just a couple of final closing thoughts. One is that we have asked Trevor, who is our current ministry resident here at EAC, to lead us through a 4-week kind of mini class on Ambassadors for Christ, which is one of Greg's topics, one of Stand to Reason's topics. And that starts in 2 weeks. And we're actually going to use STRU to do that.
Good.
And it fits perfectly with our schedule. So be on the lookout. There's sign-ups out in the lobby for that, or you can sign up online. So again, Ambassadors for Christ, and Trevor's going to lead that. If you look at the back of the program, you're going to get a sneak peek of what the content is, and it's an amazing 4-week class and four sessions.
Someone here might want to think about starting what we call a Stand to Reason outpost. And an outpost is just like an STR user group or whatever, usually in a local church. And they have a leader that we vet a little bit, and then they go through materials. Lots of times it's our materials, but you can use anything you want. So people of kindred spirit, when it comes to apologetics issues, can gather together and talk about things and knock things around and ask questions and get answers and that kind of thing. So on our website, there's a place for outposts, and then the information is all there in case someone is interested in doing that. I think we have close to 150 of them in 36 states and 9 different countries was the last count. So we're developing that concept, and it's been really fruitful.
Wonderful. Okay. I just want to ask if you would join me one more time in thanking Greg for the teaching today and being with us.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
I'll just say, I know talking with many of you today, you have followed Greg and his ministry and STR for maybe a long time. And maybe today is the first time. But I think whether a long time or a first time, the teaching today and what we learned today is so valuable for us. And I think we are emboldened and strengthened in God's word and the teaching that Greg has given, through the teaching that Greg has given us today. And I would just ask that we take this forward as we move along in our faith journey and our journey with other people. Remember that tomorrow Greg is preaching, sharing the message at both services, so 9 o'clock and 10:30, and on a different topic, but all still the same.
Right.
And it's a wonderful message. Would invite you to invite friends and to be with us for that tomorrow. I want to say again, just a huge thanks to all the volunteers and the staff who helped with today. Let's give them a big round of applause too. And finally, my thanks to you all for being here today and being a part of this forum. This is really a special time for us together. And you all have made it that special time. So thank you so much for being with us. And as we say here at EAC, it is now time to go be the church. All right. Thanks, everybody.